Hey, Future Lawyer. Welcome to the LSAT Simplified podcast presented by Hey Future Lawyer, where we talk about all things LSAT, law school admissions, and otherwise. If you want to check out our free LSAT course, go to heyfuturelawyer.com to sign up for a free account today. Hey, everyone. Welcome back. A few agenda items. First off, our Jumpstart Your January LSAT Score package kicks off this Thursday, but I think you have to sign up by the end of Wednesday. I'm not totally sure. Basically, it's LSAT prep through the January LSAT for 3 months. It's cheaper than doing our Platinum subscription. So if you want to study to go to law school next fall, I highly recommend doing that. I will also note that while it is a package geared towards the January LSAT, people are so different. It may or may not get you there by January. Unfortunately, you all are goofballs and often register before you prep. And unfortunately, changing the market is impossible. I've tried to educate people. Most people just do not make smart decisions. So we're going to offer LSAT prep and do the best we can for people that have pre-committed to taking January. So if you are considering that, check out the Jumpstart to January package. Otherwise, we got a lot of fun stuff going on today. First off, we got some pushback on my prediction that a bunch of ABA law schools were going to close. So we're going to touch on that. We also went to the LSAC Forum in Miami. So I'm going to talk about how that was, what I observed, and whether or not it's worth it for you all to attend if you are considering going in a different part of the country. We're also going to talk about a press release from Santa Clara School of Law, basically a thing they're doing. I think it's kind of cynical, but we're going to look into it. We're going to talk about the LSAT registrations for November, which is pretty big. The state of Texas is considering ending ABA accreditation. We're going to touch on that. And then I have a few individual questions from people that we will get to if time allows, depending on how those first agenda points go. All right, so for those of you that did not listen every week, a couple weeks ago, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, I did an episode on the student loan changes and why this was going to lead to basically a bloodbath of law schools. The prediction I made was that many law schools are going to be forced to reckon with the lack of funding. Law school as a system is predicated upon a lack of results-driven financing. And basically, the federal government would give these law schools unlimited money. That has been removed. Now, the only source of money will be private institutions, and private institutions care about if they're going to get their money back. So the government will just write people loans and completely not care whether or not they ever saw their money back. I mean, they care, I guess, but it was not part of the calculation. It's just if you got into law school, the government would give you however much money you wanted. Now, private institutions do not do that. They very much so care about if they're going to get paid back, because if you are a loan officer and you write all these loans and never get paid back, you're going to get fired because you're going to lose your company hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars. And companies do not like losing millions of dollars. The government honestly doesn't care. They're pretty disconnected from the outcome, because it's just the people's money. And we have this giant problem of diffuse responsibility within the government. This is a whole separate point. But the point is that no one really feels the pain when it's the government losing the money. It is lost money, but it's very different from how private institutions feel, where they very much so care, because you do not stay in business as a private institution if you are not efficient. The government always stays in business because they have a monopoly on violence. So even if they're run inefficiently and terribly, they can just point the gun at you and say, hey, pay us more taxes, which is how taxes work. Because, like, fun fact, every law, not to go into like legal philosophy, but every law is only enforced by the threat of violence. If you are not willing to shoot someone over a law, you should not support the law, because fundamentally that's what every law comes back to. If someone will not pass the law, what do? Well, the state enforces it by either fining people or send them to jail. And if you fine people and they don't pay the fine, what do? You send them to jail. What if they won't go to jail? Well, then you have to use violence to force them to go to jail. And what is violence? Fundamentally is pointing a gun at them. So if you don't believe that your laws that you support should be backed up by pointing a gun at the people that will break the laws, perhaps you shouldn't recommend those laws. So not to give my little, is that John Locke who came up with that? The state is the monopoly on violence. Anyways, the point is that the government is able to point their gun at people and just say, give us more money. And as such, they can't go out of business. Whereas if you're a private institution, you can't point the gun at anyone. You have to voluntarily convince people to give you money. So the private banks care a lot more about ROI than the government does, because the government is completely disconnected from outcomes. Anyways, so my rough prediction was student loans have been capped. This unlimited system that had existed for the past 60 years ended. The big beautiful bill said, nuh-uh, no more of that. Now you're going to have to get up to $50,000, which granted is a decent amount of money. Law schools can still take $50,000 out of the system, sort of. Because a law school cannot get all $50,000, because here's the thing. If I am a law school and I get $50,000 from a student who got their loans from the government, that student has no money to pay for their rent. And a bank won't give them loans to pay for the rent. Why would they do that? It's just as stupid as giving them money for tuition. That they're still not going to see their money back. So that $50,000 needs to pay for both tuition and living expenses, which means that schools fundamentally are only going to be able to capture a little bit of money. If you assume that someone can live off of like $2,500 a month, which I think is a very conservative assumption, or that's an aggressive assumption, that like that's pretty hard to make work in most places. It's going to be hard to live off $2,500. But even if you assume someone can, that's what, like $30,000 a year, which means only $20,000 that they can pay to the school. That's rough. So the schools are going to have a hard time capturing money. Anyways, so my prediction was the bottom schools where the salaries do not justify the debt are a broken business model. They could only exist when they were scamming people via the federal government. And now they can't do that because the federal government said game over. You were only allowed to take out $50,000. And while the tuition was like only 60 or 70,000 in many of these schools, the fundamental cost that people was taking out was often 100,000 because when you would stack their $30,000 of living expenses on top of $70,000 in tuition, it would get to 100K. So when people hear 50K, they're like, oh, that's not that bad compared to tuition. But that's not all that the loans were used for. The loans were also used for living expenses. So it actually is quite the seismic change. Anyway, I talked about that 2 episodes back. If you want to hear the really long spiel, basically I called my shot and said many schools are going to close, which I still stand by. I still think schools are going to close. And one of you that I know fairly well texted me and basically said, hey, I disagree with you and here's why. We had a conversation. I am still unconvinced by your arguments, but I'm going to go through them just so that people on air can hear them. And I do ultimately think that you have a little bit of deus ex machina in your thing, which for those of you that did not take AP literature, that means help from like save from above, which just means like, I don't know how this is going to not be a problem, but something's going to come in and kind of be a stopgap and fill the hole. I don't see what the stopgap is. Institutions cannot magically manifest money. And unless they can manifest money, they're losing a substantial percentage of their revenue. And I don't think they're going to have a way to fill in the hole. Does that mean they can scrounge for a year or two until everything completely implodes and they all go out of business? Maybe they can survive longer than I perceive. But fundamentally, the money's gone. And it's not gone. It's largely shut off. Because if they went from, let's say Cal Western, which is my favorite punching bag, with charging $70K a year, now with the loan changes, they can capture $20,000 per student. That's a giant problem. They've just gone from capturing $210,000 per student to capturing $60,000 per student, which means they have to completely rework the economics of their business. And that is going to be difficult for them. So anyway, and then if you're like, oh, well, couldn't Cal Western get private loans? And the answer is no, because no private lender would ever write a loan to go to Cal Western because private lenders want to see their money back and no one ever sees their money back having paid it to Cal Western. They're just not going to get those loans paid off. The people are probably going to die with those loans or at least hold them for a very substantial period of time. And if you're a lender, you don't want that. You actually want to get your money back. So let me pull up your email that you had sent me. Or not your email, I consolidated things. So real quick, I wanted to touch on what we both agreed on. First off, Grad Plus loans are gone and federal loan caps are at $50K per year. That's just setting the stage. Further, we agree that many law schools rely on students borrowing beyond that for tuition and living expenses. We also agree that private lenders will not write blank checks for schools with poor ROI, and underwriting will factor in employment and bar passage. So they're going to consider, is the school worth it? Like, for example, can you get a private loan to go to Harvard? Yeah, of course you can, because Harvard's a great law degree. Can you get a private loan to go to Cal Western? Fuck no, because it's Cal Western. And then further, we agree that law schools do cross-subsidize heavily, which means that the high-value students are not paying and the low-value students are paying. So my claim is largely that living expenses are overlooked here, which even if schools can capture about $100,000 in tuition across the years, the students still need $20 to $30K to survive. And if they have a $150,000 cap, that really bites into how much the schools can take out. And what if you presume, okay, well, what if they paid the school first? So if I'm a student, I take out my $50,000 in federal loans. Well, how do I survive? How do I pay for rent? I still have to, am I just going to be homeless while I go to law school? Am I not going to eat? Like, what's the solution here? And there needs to be an explanation. The argument of that is extreme is not an argument. And that is something that you actually kind of fell back to in our conversation is you often said that's extreme. That's a big claim. And like the answer is kind of yes, but that doesn't disprove my argument. That's a little bit of, I wouldn't say an ad hominem, but it's a little bit of name calling without actually addressing the core of the argument, which is that we have removed the financing mechanism. Until you can explain what the replaced financing mechanism is, I am unconvinced that one exists. And if you can explain where the money's going to come from and how these schools will survive with other financing, I will believe it. But until that is shown, I have a hard time agreeing that it's an extreme take. Like, is it pretty out there? Sure. But so was the 2008 financial crisis when it turned out that mortgage-backed securities were dog shit. I think we might be seeing something similar with law school where people don't see it coming. But I don't think it's because it's not there. I think it's because people aren't looking. So anyway, my claim is that schools are going to lose their funding, and that's going to be a giant problem. You said stuff along the lines of institutional collapse is not immediate. Law schools are bureaucratic, and universities are going to resist shutting down schools due to the prestige and the politics, their institutions, and there's a lot of inertia. Objects in motion kind of stay in motion, which I tend to agree with. And I'm sure they're going to try to scramble to make things work. But fundamentally, everyone is still subject to the laws of gravity and math. And if the law of math says that you don't have the money to pay your faculty, they're not left a choice. And if there's no levers that they can pull, like how is Cal Western going to raise money? How like can you explain that to me? If you can explain where they're going to get their revenue from, I will amend my argument. But I believe that they want to. I believe that they want to stay in business and they're going to try to. What I'm saying is I don't know that their attempts are going to work. So anyway, further, can schools adapt by cutting class sizes? Not really, because if they cut class sizes, how much will that cut their operating expenses? Probably not a lot. Can they reduce stipends? Sure. So they can spread that out, but fundamentally you still need to capture revenue, and they're not going to be able to capture revenue. So yeah, basically you were saying that they're going to innovate. These are not explicit things you said. You said they could expand non-JD programs, they can merge, they can slash costs, and all these things are true. But my point is that even when they take all these efforts to try to take a dying grasp or a dying gasp and try to give themselves a few more years, I still think fundamentally they're going to fall short and they're not going to be able to become a sustainable business because they were never a sustainable business. These were not good institutions. They were only propped up by a broken federal loan system that allowed them to scam students to an unlimited amount. Credit cards do not give you the amount of credit that law school was. So anyway, it was just an absurd system. And so, and then your other point, and for what's worth, this was a summary of your points. So apologies if I'm not doing the best representation of your thing, is that over a hold on, let me actually just pull up. Well, can I pull up our texts? Actually, there are good ways back, so I don't want to scroll all the way back because we texted a decent amount about other stuff. Anyways, your claim was basically that my argument was pretty crazy, saying that a bunch of schools are going to close in a year, which to be fair, I didn't really make that claim. That's a claim that I'd very heavily caveated, and I'd even added an amendment to my episode 2 weeks ago saying that I had failed to consider that they're only losing 1/3 of their federal loan dollars in the next year, and that the remaining thirds were going to bleed out because only their 1Ls will not be able to have the unlimited federal money. Their 2Ls and 3Ls will still have financing. So it's a gradual thing. Even still, these law schools are not going to get more money from the government. They are running out and they can't get money from elsewhere. Like there is no other source of financing. Private institutions are not going to fill the gap. So they are left with a giant problem where they had millions and millions of dollars that they relied upon that are going downwards. So at best case scenario, they're losing their revenue by a ton. Worst case scenario, they're going to be starved. And I suppose, and I mean, I predict, and I really do think that in 5 to 10 years, we're looking at substantially fewer law schools. No one is talking about this, but these schools are going out of business. Anyways, I hear your arguments. I am ultimately unconvinced, largely because I think you failed to really address the mathematical side of the argument, which is that these schools are losing revenue and they rely upon their revenue. And unless you can point to where the revenue is going to come from, that will allow them to stay in business, we're going to have real issues. And I guess the one, just to steelman the opposition to this, you could say, oh, what if the law schools substantially cut costs and they pay their professors less? They could, and this could happen, but fundamentally, the math is still there. The law of gravity still exists, and these schools do not have enough money. So the music is up. They may have a few years of dying gasps, but we're going to see a lot fewer law schools in a few years unless something changes the other way. And thankfully, like good, these schools shouldn't exist. There's too many law schools. They produce too many attorneys. They charge ridiculous prices. It is a good thing that this system is imploding because this was a broken system and these schools need to not exist. Their whole institutional purpose was to scam people. I don't think they view themselves that way, but that is how I view them. As someone who observes the system, they do not produce highly paid attorneys. They put people in crazy debt. Just to put it in perspective, the average graduate of Cal Western has like $300,000 in debt and makes like 60 to 70K. These are numbers that no one ever gets out of. Ideally, you want your loan to income to be like 1-to-1. These are people that make like 1/7 of what their debt is. So if anyone can make the argument for like how that's okay, I would love to hear it. I mean, the answer is you can't. That's not an argument you can make without violating basic presuppositions of math. It's not possible. And basically, they relied upon this institutional prestige of, oh, it's law school, it's super prestigious. And people would convince themselves that's true, but it's not true. Law school is not hard to get into. It's really easy to get in. But people would be so happy to tell grandma at their Christmas party that they were going to law school that they would put themselves in life-altering generational debt just so that they could pretend on LinkedIn that they were going to have an impressive career. And anyway, so are people responsible for their own choices? Like, yeah, and maybe we shouldn't blame the schools. Maybe we should blame the people that allow themselves to be conned. But also, I kind of do blame the schools. I think it's both people's fault. Like, yes, as a person, you should not let yourself get scammed. But on the other hand, should we maybe just shut down these schools if they're just scamming people constantly and not actually producing high paid attorneys? I think there's a pretty valid argument there. So, anyway, that's that, which brings me into the Miami rundown. So, we went to the Miami LSAC Forum, and my large takeaway from this is that, oh my God, you guys are in the lion's den. People all look the same. If anything, I would actually argue that our booth is probably one of the less credible looking booths because we're not super marketing people. We are like, we do LSAT and product first. And like, I throw together the podcast. But as you can tell, this is not like, I'm not going through HR with like the 10 bullet points we need to hit. So we're not showing up in like suits and shit. We don't have ties on. We don't have some fancy like tablecloth on our table. We weren't selected for how, I don't know, friendly we are. Not to say that Sean's our developer who's also there, are not friendly, but that's not why we are here. And so there's a lot of law school admissions people that are that way. There was also some people from LSAC that were there, and some of them were giving great advice. There are some fantastic people. There are also some people giving some pretty bad advice. The one thing I want to hit on is there was a military lawyer, and they were across from us in the law school like forum, so we can kind of overhear them. And at points where things were quiet and we weren't talking to anyone, I don't want to say even eavesdrop, but they're right there, so you can hear them. And this person was talking to a prospective student, and this student was talking about where to go to law school. And this military lawyer was saying, just go to law school and then you can transfer out and go to a school where you would actually be happy to be at. And to LSAC's credit, one of their people was saying, that's a terrible plan. Don't do that. But this lawyer was not backing down. This lawyer was saying, just go to law school and you can transfer. And the reason that this is really bad advice, for those of you wondering, is that transferring is really fucking hard. To get top grades in law school is much harder than just getting a high LSAT score. A high LSAT score is in your control. You take the LSAT when you want to. No one forces you to take an LSAT. You decide when you take the LSAT. Further, you can study as much as you want. Law school is not the same. Law school, you take the final the day of the final, period. And if you don't prep, game over, you're fucked, legal career over, you don't get to transfer. So the LSAT, you get reduced. In law school, you do not get reduced. Further, in law school, why would you think you're going to be in the top 10%? If you are not going to outcompete those people to get into a better law school in the first place, why do you think you'll outcompete them in law school? It is narcissistic to think that you will outcompete people who, compared to you, have similar LSAT scores and similar GPAs. If you think that you are going to go to law school, get good grades, and transfer out, you are delusional, you are narcissistic, and you need to look yourself in the mirror and say, I am not a special snowflake. I am not the exception to the rules. I mean, you might be because 10% of people are, but what evidence do you have to think you are? If you have not shown that on the LSAT, if you have not shown that in your undergraduate GPA, which that's the reason you're not getting into a better school, why the fuck do you think you're now going to suddenly lock in and crush it in law school? And the answer is that most of you just don't want to do the work. And it's easier to say, I'll do the work in law school instead of doing the work now. Even though doing the work now is easier, working on the LSAT, I promise you, is easier than getting good grades in law school. That requires doing the work today. And people hate doing the work today because a lot of people are lazy. So if you are someone who's like, I'm just going to go to law school, work hard and transfer. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say that works for literally no one, but I will say that to have that plan is delusional. And further, it's one of those things where I view it as incredibly immature because it's just not going to work. The other thing I will note is that people come up to everyone at these fairs as if we are giving good advice. And I'm not saying people aren't, but there was a lot of bad advice. I mean, there was an LSAT booth next to us talking about all this formal logic nonsense. And it was honestly pretty crazy to hear how bad their advice was, talking about like different question types. Like question type, I think they said question type 2N or something. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, that's not a thing. I do LSAT full time every day and I have no fucking clue what you're saying, which made me curious. It's like, but people don't know better. And honestly, there was a guy, it's funny, he talked to you, there were 3 LSAT preps there, and he talked to both LSAT prep but us, probably because I think we looked a little bit less professional. And this was a guy who you could tell was definitely, I mean, he looked like an undergrad kid, and you could tell he was definitely looking for prestige. And honestly, I don't portray prestige. Like, you can see me, I'm in my office right now, I work from home, I'm in my t-shirt. Like, I focus on putting out really good content. I don't over focus on my background. I don't give a fuck. I don't focus on like what shirt I wear. Like, it's a gray shirt I got from Hawaii. It's cool, fun stuff. But some people do care about that. And it is real. Like, there's a reason people do focus on their background stuff. It's because a lot of people do care about these subtle things. I honestly cater towards smart people. That's my target audience. And the thing is, smart people tend to care a lot more about what people say than what they look like and what their background is. But it was funny because we got jumped right over it. The guy got bad advice from the booth next to us. And I could hear him talking to this guy. And it's like, the advice you're getting is garbage. And you chose not to talk to us, which is fine. Like, I'm not actually offended because abundance mindset. There's literally unlimited LSAT prep people in my mind. So like, I don't care if one guy didn't talk to us. But it was funny though, because it's like, by focusing on prestige and not focusing on what matters, this guy clearly, it's funny, he like kind of stepped on a landmine and was getting bad advice because he didn't want to talk to us because like we weren't in suits. I don't know. I just thought it was silly. It was really cool seeing a lot of you though. I saw a bunch of you there, which was awesome. I was surprised how many of you recognized us and were like, "Oh my God, I know who you are." That was cool. It was not good for my ego. My wife was not happy when I came back and I was like, miniature famous, which I'm not. It was just that in this very, I'd say, niche area of LSAT prep and law school admissions, a decent amount of you know who I am. I will say it's somewhat surreal because when I'm doing this in my office, it doesn't feel like I'm talking to anyone. I know you guys are there on the other side, but it's very disconnected in this internet age. So to actually recognize people and be like, I know who you are. You've helped me so much. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's really cool. So I did appreciate meeting those of you that we saw. It was very insightful. I actually signed a book, which was cool. Like someone brought one of my books that I wrote. Those of you that don't know, I wrote a book back in 2022, which is when I graduated college. Shout out to me. Wrote a book before ChatGPT and the fall that I graduated college. So anyway, it's so stupid like that people care about stuff like that. But I don't know. I don't really push stuff like that. It's like I wrote a book. Like, so what? It's not that hard. Anyway, my point though is that it was cool. So with that, there's a few other news items. One is that Santa Clara came out with a $50,000 loan cap. I guess I probably should have hit on this after I talked about the loan changes and the argument against. But they basically said we're now going to make it so that there's only our top tuition is $50,000. Now they didn't lower their tuition. Their tuition's like $66,000 or $67,000 per year. Instead of lowering their tuition to $50K, what they said is that everyone is guaranteed a $16,000 or $17,000 tuition, or $16,000 or $17,000 tuition scholarship. Which, if you're smart, you might be like, well, Ben, that's not really a scholarship though, is it? That's just them lowering the cost from $67,000 to $50,000. The answer is yes, that is them lowering the cost, but they are dressing it up as a scholarship because it is convincing to people and it gets them to like Santa Clara. Because if now they are comparing a school that is $50,000 listed tuition or a school that's $67,000 but gave them a $17,000 discount, people for whatever reason prefer to go to the school that is the higher price, but is giving them a discount, even though fundamentally they're paying the same price, whether it's $50,000 with the scholarship or $50,000 because that is the listed price. People like getting it. And as such, it can sometimes be the difference. So they're smart in how they're doing it. I get why they're doing it. It's unfortunate that they have to cater to consumer psychology, but as someone who also caters to consumer psychology, I get it. People make really odd decisions with stuff like this, but fundamentally, it is silly. Now, here's where I think Santa Clara is really being silly. They are forgetting that people still need to pay their living expenses. So even if they can go to the federal government, get $50,000 in loans, and then pay that to Santa Clara, now all their students that came in are paying them $50,000, have no money for their rent. So Santa Clara, you have literally taken all the money. You can't do that. You can't take all their money. If you take all their money, your students won't be able to pay for their groceries. They won't be able to pay for their rent. They won't be able to pay for their books. They won't be able to pay for their car insurance. Say they don't have a car and they're just taking the bus to work. They can't pay for their bus because they have $0 because you've taken every last penny of their student loan money. So I thought it was, excuse me, that's the dogs. I thought it was really funny just because it's so obviously poorly thought out by the Santa Clara people that they're failing to consider that these people still need to pay for their living expenses. And if you take every last penny of their student loan money, they won't be able to pay rent. And so yeah, Santa Clara tried to sidestep this. They're still going to get smashed by the student loan change. And I think this is an indication that these student loan changes actually are going to have quite the seismic effect, including on schools like Santa Clara that are trying to sidestep it. Okay, other points. So there's 47,000 people registered for the November LSAT. This is really high. Last year, there were 31,000 people registered. I will note this is the amount of registrations. This always fades as we get closer to the test. As we get there, people decide not to take the test for various reasons, whether they're not ready, or maybe they get their October score back and they scored well. But this 47,000 will likely come down. I would expect it to be perhaps 35. 47,000 is still crazy high. August was unprecedented at 34K. 47K is a lot more than 34K. So it's still going to be the biggest LSAT like ever, likely. And I will note that the November LSAT was the biggest LSAT last year. Last year, there were 31,000 people who took the LSAT last year. This year with 47K, that's way more. So yeah, crazy year. What's the takeaway from this? Well, there's a lot of people applying, which means you got to be your best applicant. You got to have a high score. You have to apply early, ideally. The November LSAT just is not optimal to apply. Like you guys, people will say that applying early is a myth. It is not a myth. It actually does matter. The differences are quite substantial. So I don't love applying with November. It's kind of the last LSAT I'm even okay with. Some people can get in with okay scores with January, but I will tell you, every month that goes on, it gets harder and harder. So Anyway, if I were you all, I'd probably be planning for next fall. Like, I don't know what you guys are doing unless you've already taken the LSAT at this point and liked your score, not just taken it and got a crappy score, but took it and you're like, oh, this is the score I can apply with. If that's not you, I don't think this is your cycle. And I'm not here to be mean. I'm just here like, this is a really shitty cycle to apply with the student loan changes, with the amount of applicants. It's just going to be such a clusterfuck this cycle. And if you're still studying for the LSAT, you are not on top of it. And this is not a cycle where you cannot be on top of it. It is the most competitive ever by the looks of it. So to be kind of just scrapping things together in the middle of the cycle, it's not a good spot to be. And further, you only have one LSAT then, because part of the LSAT is that you have ranges. On any given day, you can score plus or minus 4 points. I actually did talk to LSAC about this in Miami. It was cool. I talked to one of their people about the LSAT, and they were saying that based on their internal data, it's a plus or minus 4 point range. I've always said plus or minus 5 points that was kind of a guess of my own. But they say that, yeah, an LSAT score, if you're actually a 165 average, that means on a bad day you score 161, on a good day you score 169. And I'm like, that totally tracks with what I see. I'd always said plus or minus 5, but they said plus or minus 4. That's still a 9 point range. Now, what happens is you can score anywhere in that range. So say you're averaging a 165 and you take the November LSAT, you could score 161 by no fault of your own due to pure randomness. That sucks because the difference between a 161 and a 169, which you're also capable of, is night and day in admissions, which is why you want to give yourself multiple chances to take the LSAT. But when you only take November or you only aim for January, you are fucked because you only give yourself one shot. And sure, half of people will score above average, but also half of them will score below average. So there's a 50% chance you're going to cost yourself like 3 to 5 LSAT points, potentially more. Could be like 8 LSAT points. And every LSAT point is worth about $10,000. So by planning on January, you could cost yourself $80,000 to $90,000 in tuition, which sucks, but that is what happens when you plan poorly. So how do we fix this, everyone? Stop planning poorly. Take the LSAT when you're ready and apply for next fall. If I were you, that's what I would do. I know none of you do this. Everyone ignores me and just still applies and sticks their fingers in their ears and says, la, 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 I can't hear you. I'm applying this fall. But if I were you, and this were my future, I would take it incredibly seriously. This is the start of your legal career. This will control your financial future. To kind of half-ass it, which is what happens when you take November or January as your first take and apply. That is half-assing it, by the way. You are half-assing the start of your legal career. You will likely go to a bad law school that you're not excited with, and that is a bummer. Okay, anyway. Yeah, what else do we want to hit on? Okay, we'll quickly touch the Texas thing. So this is an article from Reuters by, it's not loading. So September 29th, Karen Sloan wrote, Texas is poised to end its reliance on the American Bar Association for law school oversight and instead let its highest court determine which school's graduates can be admitted as lawyers in the state. So in the US, the ABA, which is the American Bar Association, decides which schools are ABA accredited, and people that go to those schools are accredited to take the bar. However, Texas is changing that. They're saying the Supreme Court decides which schools are accredited. Now, I don't know. In my ideal world, they would make the bar higher. The ABA has a pretty low bar. There's a lot of shitty ABA law schools. I don't know that Texas is raising the bar. Maybe they're lowering the bar. And I don't know why this is. Like maybe it's because the schools are woke or something. Or maybe it's because they're shitty and they're financially screwing people off. That would be the better reason for why they are restricting this. But either way, Texas has changed things. And they're saying we are going to decide, not the ABA. And further, this is a developing story. This literally just came out last Friday, which would have been September 26th or 25th or something. So I don't know what's going to happen with this, but it is a developing story. And basically they said, quote, it is of the tentative opinion that the ABA should no longer have the final say on whether a law school's alumni can sit for the Texas bar or be licensed. The court itself would determine which law schools are approved under the state lawyer admission rules according to the preliminary order. So yeah, once again, there's no reasoning here. They don't say why this is the case. They also don't say what schools would lose their status or what schools would gain status. Further, this would only apply to Texas because if you went to a Texas school, you couldn't go to like Kansas and take the bar because it's Texas's rules, and Texas's rules only stretch as far as Texas goes. And further, but what this could mean is that if you go to an ABA law school in California, say a shitty ABA law school like Cal Western, maybe Texas would say, you guys can't take the bar here. Your law school is shitty. Or maybe it's like woke law schools. Like, I don't know if this is politically motivated or if it's economically motivated. I would hope economics, but I don't know. Either way, developing story. I'll keep you all posted. I just thought it was interesting that they said that. Oh, whoa, this is a longer article. Woo, let's keep reading then. Texas is the first state to say its plans to end oversight of its law schools by the EBA, the federally recognized accreditor of U.S. law schools. The Supreme Courts of Florida, Ohio, and Tennessee have launched similar reviews of their own ABA requirements in recent months. All right, so that seems conservative. I know Florida and Tennessee are red states. I don't know if Ohio is. My inclination is that Ohio is purple. But okay, interesting. So is this like a Republican thing? I don't know. A Texas Supreme Court spokesperson on Monday said the court would not comment beyond the order. So they're not saying why they're doing it. Okay. Jen Rosado Perea, the ABA's managing director of accreditation and legal education, said in a statement on Monday that the organization is currently reviewing the implications of the Texas's court's order. So they're reacting. I mean, none of this is really telling us anything. Quote, we look forward to continuing to work with Texas and other states to ensure that a national accreditation system exists that promotes equality, efficiency, and flexibility while maintaining lottery portability across state lines to the benefits of students, employers, law schools, and the states themselves, Perea said. Okay, yes, that's a pretty like corporate speak non-answer. I imagine the ABA is not happy with Texas, but they're saying like, oh, we're going to keep working with them. It's a really collaborative thing, which maybe. But let's continue. The Texas Supreme Court did not provide details on how any new law school approval system would function, but asked the public to submit comments on the proposal by December 1st, with anticipated changes taking effect January 1st. The court said it intends to preserve the ability of Texas law graduates to practice in other states. Well, that's not their decision. That's not under their purview. If I'm Texas, I cannot just declare that my graduates can go to any state. Their authority ends at the state borders. So they actually don't have that unless they come to a mutual agreement with other states. So I feel like the court is kind of failing to see how far their power goes. But anyways, let's continue. It said it does not want to impose additional accreditation, compliance, or administrative burdens on law schools, and that it aims to provide stability and flexibility to schools with a set of simple, objective, and ideologically neutral criteria, such as bar exam pass rates. So, like, what's the motivation here? Are they saying that there's bad law schools? Like, this feels like it's hard to even understand the motivation here. Like, it's not very clear what they're doing. They continue. 8 of Texas's 10 law deans warned in a July letter to the court that dropping the ABA requirement, which has been in place since 1983, would impede lawyer mobility and increase costs. Maybe. I mean, I don't know. The ABA often, I think, makes things more expensive, not less expensive. But anyway, it's hard to really evaluate this because they're not explaining their argument. They're just explaining what they're doing. But like, what's the motivation behind it? It seems incredibly unclear. However, they continue. University of Houston law dean Leonard Baines told Reuters on Monday that he was pleased the court showed commitment to law degree portability and avoiding onerous requirements in law schools. But Baines said the order creates uncertainty for legal education in the backdrop of an already chaotic of higher education. So this is why I can't stand corporate speak. They're not saying anything. Like, what's their motivation? They didn't say it. But anyway, apparently Florida's move, which they're doing something similar, it was about a diversity mandate, which was put on hold until August 2026. And apparently they claimed the ABA was overly political. I don't know if that's true, but maybe. Both courts are largely Republican, though, it does say. So, yeah, I mean, it appears to be political. I don't actually know what's going on. It's hard to say. My reaction as a law school person is this could be a good change or a bad change, depending on the direction. I don't think the ABA is perfect. I think the ABA should be a lot harsher on the law schools. There's too many law schools. The ABA needs to be much more critical of like Cal Western, like shut down Cal Western. Cal Western should not be ABA accredited. On the other hand, removing the ABA could get rid of the accreditation broadly, and now there can be an even shittier school than Cal Western. Like, there's all these really bad schools in California, the California bar schools, and they're way worse than the ABA schools. So, I don't know. It's hard to say. Like, is the ABA good or perfect? I would argue no, but it's better than alternatives. It could be a lot worse. So, I mean, I don't think this is due to like some deeper concern for legal education. It appears to be like owning the libs or something and being like, oh, they're too woke, therefore we're going to close it because of diversity. I don't know. I mean, maybe there's merit to it, but on a initial pass, it looks kind of meaningless to me. It looks like it's kind of all bark, no bite. So anyway, that's Texas for you. Let's see what else we have. Doing kind of a quick one this week, but I do have a few emails. So one person emailed me saying, I just received my September LSAT score and it was a 170. This was the same score I got in August. I know most people would be happy with this, but I couldn't help feeling disappointed. As shown below my previous practice test, I've been consistently scoring in the high 170s. So you scored a 172, 177, 175, 179, 169, 175, 177, and 179. I wouldn't say consistently scoring in the high 170s. You were scoring all over the 170s. So you are on average like a 175 plus or minus 4 points. So a 170 is fairly within range. Like, that's not that crazy. They continue. In August, I felt I had a bad test. I knew coming out of the test that I performed on the low end of my range. Yeah, which happens. But for September, I could have bet money that I had done it, that I should have been done with this test, and I'd be walking out with my mid 170 score. Yeah, well, just take it again. You've already done the work. Just keep taking. Why wouldn't you take October? Given that didn't happen, I'm starting to second guess myself. Maybe I just can't get those few tough questions right. I'm second guessing my practice test as well. I've done so much LSAT prep that I recognize the hardest questions in each section, so my results are inflated. There's only one 100% fresh test in the ones I did below, and it was test 136. Oh, so there's another thing, is that you've already seen all the hardest questions on these sections. So maybe your high 170s are not actually representative. Maybe you're more like a 174 plus or minus 3 points. Yeah, it's hard to know. I mean, this is why I tend to recommend segregating the questions you do and making sure you have some fresh LSATs. At Hey Future Lawyer, we segregate them for you and tell you which ones to do and which ones to save so that people kind of always have fresh ones that they can pull from. But anyway, that's besides the point. They say I'm lost. Should I even take October? I have my application ready to go. My GPA is a 4.27. Maybe I should just see what I can get with these stats. What do you think? Yeah, it depends on your goals. Because if you just want to go to an average law school, a 4.27, 170 is going to get you great opportunities. If you want to go to Harvard, then yeah, of course you need to retake. Like you have to try again, especially given that you have higher scores on record. Even if they are biased by having potentially some questions, a 179 you cannot do just by being a dummy. So I do think you're higher than a 170. You should retake. To not retake is crazy. So anyway, short advice, but variance is normal. Further, people are really good at convincing themselves that they're better than they are. Like, are you actually scoring in the high 170s? The answer is no, you weren't. And this is what I mean by people overly identify. This person said, I'm consistently scoring in the high 170s. They had a 172, 177, 175, 179, 169, 175, 177, and 179. And then further, they admit that this might be biased by the fact that they've seen many of these questions before. And the answer is yeah, of course. Sometimes you've seen the questions before and that will help your score upwards. So are you actually averaging in the high 170s? No, you're averaging in the mid 170s. And not only are you averaging in the mid 170s, that's biased by the fact that you've already seen many of these tests. So you might even be in the low 170s in terms of true understanding. Here's the thing. A low 170s plus or minus 4 points still puts you in the mid 170s a lot of the time. So you should still retake. But anyway, I don't know why you wouldn't retake. To not retake would be really silly when you have more points than you. All right, cool. So that was that one. What else do we have? We have another email. Hey Ben, I was referred to you by so-and-so. I took both August and September and scored a 165 and 164. My goal is 175 plus, which is good, but I want to know about your practice test scores. Where were you practice testing? But the issue is that I've now taken every single practice test that is available on Law Hub through the Advantage subscription. So I'm really not sure what would be helpful and or how to study with resources I've already seen in the past. Well, the answer is actually quite quick. Unless you can score a 180, you are not done with that test. It has something to teach you. Further, you really shouldn't run out of tests. You said that you studied from May to August of this year, which is only 3 months. I have been doing every single LSAT question to record for our website, and I get through maybe one reading comp and 5 to 6 LR questions per day because it takes a long time to do it well. So through that, I have not gotten them all done. I've been doing this every day for the past year, and I don't think I'm done with, like, there's still a decent amount to go because when you're actually going deep on LSAT questions, you cannot do them all because you have to go deep on them. So you have skimmed the surface. Your review needs to be better. You need to go way deeper on the questions you're doing. You are not going deep enough if you have gone through all of them in 3 months. That's just a guarantee. Unless you can score 180, a test will have something to teach you. So back to the drawing board. And yeah. If you enjoyed what we talked about today or learned something new, please leave a review or a rating. It really does help us out and helps us reach more people. If you have a question or anything you want talked about in the world of LSAT or law school admissions, you can always email support@heyfuturelawyer.com to get it in the podcast agenda. Just put podcast in the subject and we will talk about it on the show. Alrighty, that's all we have for today. So I will see you all next time.